Welcome. This is Mark Wolf. Welcome to IST 538 Fundamentals of XML. Basically, this is a two-part video that's called here Overview of the Course Part 1 and Part 2. And what we're going to do is talk about the course site, which is this here, and we're going to talk about how we use Blackboard for the course. We'll just start over here on the left. I have my email here, a link to Blackboard, and this will just take you to a login, and then you would go on into the site. And then I also have Ask a Question here. Both of these links take you to Blackboard to ask a question. My email is here more for questions that are really outside of the course itself. They're things that would be private in nature or an emergency or something you really don't want discussed publicly in the course, and you would just use common sense with that. But in general, all discussion and so forth, and we'll talk about this more in a little bit, will take place in Blackboard because it's supposed to be a virtual classroom where the conversation takes place. I do have a login schedule that I try to stick to. I do it in the morning and basically in the evening, 8:45 and 5 p.m. But I do log into Blackboard regularly. I have any time, like ask a question for homeworks and group assignments and so forth. Usually I have all the discussion, all the posts made to the discussion board. I have those forwarded to my email anyway, so I'm always getting alerts. But basically these are times when you know that I'll at least have seen something that you've posted. At these two times, you can be sure of that. The textbook we're using, it's not really a textbook per se, it is the book for the course, but the price, as you'll see, I hope that you appreciate it, I know I would, and do, it's a little bit lower, but basically this is the only book that we use for the course and the only thing that you have to purchase, and it's XML Visual Quick Start Guide, second edition. It's really hard to find the first edition anymore, but if for some reason you do, please do not get that. Get the second edition only, because the second edition is a completely different version from the first edition. So second edition, it's Kevin Howard Goldberg. It's put out by Peach Pit Press. University Bookstore, last I checked, had it on order, but it's back order, so they do not have it in stock. Amazon has used copies, so you could probably get one there. And then also there's the Peach Pit Press publisher's website, which I don't have linked here, but I can show you how to get to that in a second. And I'll put a link up for this if I can link to it, but I will have the book on 48-hour reserve, and I will update the website to reflect that so that you can check it out for up to 48 hours of any one time and use it. And really what the idea I have for this is that for people who haven't gotten it yet in time would be able to use that. And I think I mentioned this in one of the announcements. If you do not get the book in time, please let me know, and I will make sure that you get any of the reading materials. But just make sure you put the order in, and let me know if you have any issues, and I can help you resolve them. I'm not going to read the course syllabus word for word, but I have all the basically learning outcomes that are expected, things that we'll cover in the course, and pretty much everything's there. We may get into a few little sort of side technologies or things that will support it. I don't list out every single thing we do because when you're using web technologies, you're often using lots of little different bits and pieces here to support the main work that we do, which is XML technologies. Look at grading here just at a glance. Basically we have group exercises and discussion, and that contributes to 15% of your grade. We'll do 5 homeworks, so 10% for each homework, or 10 points, and then 2 tests, each worth 10%, and then a final project that you'll do that is 15%. And we'll talk a little bit more about each one of these as we get going here. Software and technology, it goes without saying, but I guess it should be underscored that you should have access to a high-speed internet connection and a technology backup plan in order to take this course. So high-speed internet connection, you're going to be looking at videos on YouTube. You're going to be needing to access Blackboard, which assumes that you have high-speed internet connection. And then, you're going to need, you really should have access to that. I don't know that this is how it should be, or excuse me, this is required, but this is in I guess a best case scenario would be that you have all this technology at home, because if you're taking an online course, there's perhaps a good chance that you're working, so you're going to need to have access to this technology when, say, you can't get to the university library to use the computer there. But how you do that is none of my business. My main concern is just that you have access to it enough to do the course. Backup technology plan would be, again, if you feel like your computer is kind of on its last legs, then you might want to think, oh, well, I have a cousin or a brother or sister, or I can go to the university or perhaps work. I have some other computer, and again, an internet connection that I can use in the case my computer doesn't work anymore. So just a little note on that. We'll be using Notepad++ to do pretty much, I'd say, 80 to 90% of the class. And that's a XML editing tool, and we'll get to look at that on the first unit of the course. We're going to use Basics, and I'll click to the page here, Notepad++. It's got a cute logo here of a chameleon. He changes colors. There are other XML editors out there, but this is the one that I use, and all the examples that I do will be shown using Notepad++. So just if anything you can do to use that application would make your life in the course much easier, and all the problem solving go much more quickly. Basics is another tool we'll use for Xquery. Xquery, we spend basically 1 unit or maybe a unit and a half discussing that, and that's basically another flavor of XML. It's kind of like a database software technology that we'll talk about later on. For those who have Mac platforms, again, Notepad++ is only for Windows, and it's installed on all the ITS computers on campus. So any computer that you log into, say, in the Information Commons in the libraries, or any of the computer labs on campus, any of those that you log into are going to have Notepad++ already installed. JEdit, I don't know if it's installed there, but why I have JEdit listed here is that if you're a Mac user, JEdit is available for Mac. It's a great editing application. It's not quite as good as Notepad++. There's things you can't do in it that you can do in Notepad++. But because I only do my demonstrations in Windows, I will not be doing any in JEdit. Excuse me. But if if one of you use a Mac computer and need help installing JEdit, I will help you, and we can converse over Blackboard. It's pretty user-friendly, and I will make sure that you get up and running for that. Basics has a version. I'm pretty certain for Windows. I know for certain, but I think for Mac as well. But we're not going to worry about Basics right now because that's pretty far ahead in the course. For readings, when you get a hold of the textbook, you'll see that it's a really slim volume. There's not a lot there. That's the good news. I guess the bad news, or just the reminder, is that each chapter that we read sometimes requires multiple readings, and I present each new unit with the assumption that if you're watching a video on some technical aspect of XML, I make that presentation based on the assumption that you've done the reading. So you'll do the readings first, and then watch the videos, and then proceed to like group assignment exercises or homeworks. The author of the textbook has put all the code examples on his site. You can download them in one as one big download, which is a zip file, or you can do each one of these as a zip file. It's probably just as quick just to download them all at once. Because there is something to be said for typing examples in, but there comes a point of diminishing returns where you're just typing them in and you're wasting your time. So what I say when we do the when you do the reading, that you should do the examples and copy and paste them or enter them into Notepad++ and run them and see what they look like, and get used to basically doing reading, but also doing a lot of hands-on work with your reading, because that's how we learn, is by doing in this course. So basically each week is what I call a unit or a module, but basically I go by unit. That's how the course will be delivered. And the first quote-unquote day, because it's online, we really don't have a day that we meet. Basically it's week by week or unit by unit. Will be next week, or January 23rd. And then after that, I will release each unit the weekend ahead of time. So for example, and I'll remind you of all this, but Unit 1, first day is January 23rd, but you're going to have access to this like at least Thursday or Friday before, well before Tuesday gets here. And the same for Unit 2. Usually I release those materials on that Friday or so. I don't have a hard and fast release date, but I tend to try to have it ready for you by the weekend starts, because if you all work 9-to-5 jobs, that means that you have the weekends to work on these assignments. So it's a little bit different when it's online. When it's face-to-face, it's so much easier to kind of figure out what day you're in, what week you're in. But for online, it's a little different. But we do have the flexibility, which is nice. We can have something due at midnight on a Sunday, or it can be due in the middle of the day on a Monday. But I try to pick release dates and due dates for things that make sense and work for your schedule within reason. The discussion board is here, and let me just log in and we'll take a look at it here. I'm just going to back out here to discussions. As you can see, I'm in professor view here. Let me just go into student view so it looks something more like what you're used to, and it's a little slow. But here we have discussions, and for each week I don't have them listed here, but basically I'll do discussions by unit or exercise, and I'll create a forum for each one, and each one of those, whether it's like a homework or a unit or a group exercise that you're doing, I'll have all that discussion set up so it can happen related to that forum. So if it's a homework 1, I'll create that forum, and then any question that revolves around homework 1, you would post it there, and then I would go in and answer, or a student would do that. We'll talk about Blackboard a little bit more in a second. So basically for the discussion forums, that's where all questions and comments and useful information that you think would help out your fellow students, or what should be brought to the concern of the instructor, that should all be posted in the discussion forum. And in that discussion board, I have them, and you will see this as the course moves on, there is pigeonholes that you should put your questions or comments. And if you can't find a pigeonhole, like it doesn't have anything to do with homework 1 and it has nothing to do with, say, an exercise you're working on, then I have just ask a question, which is linked off up here, and you would link to it, and then you can just ask a question here. And sorry about that, let me just exit out of this preview mode. Let's see if it'll take us there. Ask a question. Yeah, so here you would just ask a question, and this is kind of a clearinghouse for any question, like say it's related to the textbook, or there's just a general computer issue, whatever. That's where you can post that. Basically the groups, I do not use a groups as it's known in Blackboard, but I do set up groups to work on assignments together depending on the size of the class. If the class is on the smallish side, you might all work as one big group together, because if it gets too small, I find that that's not really useful. You don't get to collaborate. If it gets too big, It's easy for just a few people to carry the load, or easy for, say, certain people to get squelched out of a conversation. So I will set that up as the course goes on. They're not set up yet. But just so you know, there will be a lot of group activities and group conversation that happens on the Blackboard tool. Netiquette, it's kind of an old-fashioned term already, but basically it's how I hope and how I plan to conduct my behavior and communication over Blackboard and via email, but mostly Blackboard, because as I mentioned before, I don't use a lot of email except for, as I said, personal questions, or when I grade homework assignments, I handle that over email typically. But as our motto must be, think before you post. So in general, I've never had a problem in the class. People are very courteous to each other, and that's always that's a good thing. Homeworks in the final project. Just a reminder, to excel in this class, students must demonstrate ability to do web technologies, hand in assignments on time. I won't get into this too much, but the reason we have schedules is it's not so much for me to give you an obstacle course to run through and to see if you can meet deadlines on time. That's not the point. The point being is just to keep us all on the same page, because if everyone gets their own timeline or deadlines, then what happens is I'm sort of teaching one course, a separate course to, say, 10 to 15 different people. So you know, the syllabus and the schedule is to keep us all on time. Don't fall behind if you can help it, because if you do fall behind, it just makes each subsequent assignment hard, because you're playing catch up, and often the rest of your classmates have moved on because they're asking questions germane to this week's assignment rather than 2 weeks ago. Life does get in the way, so I'm usually a pretty fair instructor, I think, when it comes to making sure people stay on track. But anyways, I'll leave it at that. Just be mindful of it. But just keep in the back of your mind, you really should devote 8 to 10 hours per unit, so that's per week, to the course. You know, when you think of reading, your exercises, your homework assignment, everything involved in the course, think about, consider about 8 to 10 hours per week to devote to the course. Tests, those will be both, we'll do 2 of them, and both of them, except you'll do a practice test, which doesn't count, but the 2 that do count, those will be administered over Blackboard, and the practice one will be. Submission process, for homework assignments, you're going to actually email those to me, and you should put them in a heading of something like IST 538 Homework 1 submission. Something like that. For homeworks, we do have a discussion board, so there will be question and answers on there, but I expect that when you do homeworks, you're doing your work, even though it is a collaborative environment in the sense that if I answer a question for somebody, I'm going to answer it to the quote-unquote whole class, so everyone's going to see it in the forum. But it should be obvious that you shouldn't post like sort of XML solutions to the entire assignment for a homework assignment on the forum. Those should just be sent to me as your final submission. And we'll use what's called a zip format, and I will go into that when we actually do get into the first assignment. But basically, that's a way of taking multiple files and compressing them into a zip file. If you don't use zip files, you can get away with it maybe with the first assignment, but after that, Outlook will deem it a virus and won't let me get access to it, or makes it really hard for me to get access to it, or quarantine it. So zip files are how we get away from Outlook thinking what you're sending me is a virus. Once I grade homework, I send it back to you via email and write comments and tell you the points that you got on that. For disability support, I have my language here about that, and then have information where you can reach out to get assistance with that if you need it. And for academic integrity, I just follow the university's policy, and you can click on that and learn about that. So that's it for part 1 of the overview of the course, and I'll be back shortly.